So the fight in the Senate over redistricting reform dragged on today. The Democrats' latest tactic was to petition the Rules Committee for a public hearing on the governor's bill, a move that the Republicans dismissed as playing politics. My next guest disagrees. He thinks debating the bill would be a good thing, but he would also like to see the governor flex a little more muscle here. Bill Samuels is the founder of the New Roosevelt Initiative. He's also a former lieutenant governor candidate, and he is joining us from New York City tonight. Bill, nice to see you.
Nice to see you too, Liz.
Okay, so we've seen a lot of posturing on this bill so far and not a whole lot of progress. You have actually called for the governor to put the bill in his budget proposal, in his 30-day amendments. We have not seen that. So what does that mean?
Well, let's just first state this battle has gone on for 35 years. There are two issues. One is this very complicated issue, and both parties have cynically bet that the public will not understand it when they go to the polls. The Democrats cynically did nothing in their term in power, thinking that they would re-win the state Senate. I believe that we already know Skelos will do nothing unless the governor decides among his priorities to use redistricting as a leverage to give something else to Skelos that he wants.
Okay, wait, stop. Stop. Hold on. Before we go any further, what might be worthwhile of such a trade? I mean, first of all, you're taking something that is supposed to be reform, and you are using the age-old Albany trick of horse trading. How is that a good idea?
Well, you know, that's what politics is about. One has to remember, in '92, Mario wanted to sign the redistricting bill, but horse traded. And as a result, it was not signed. In this case, Skelos wants us to reduce the tax on people that earn over $200,000, and a lot of other economic reforms. Yes, they are needed, but if we focus on the economic reforms first, and Skelos gets everything he wants, there is not a prayer that redistricting will be passed in this session.
Okay, Bill, hold on. So you're saying that maybe the governor should use the millionaire's tax as some kind of leverage with the Senate Republicans? The Senate Republicans and the governor, I thought, were on the same page on the millionaire's tax.
Well, maybe they are. Maybe they are. The governor, we don't sit in his shoes, but let's say he has 15 priorities, okay, all of them important.
Okay.
Let's say redistricting is 14. It's number one with Skelos. And we wouldn't be in this situation of having to cut teachers and cut pensions if we'd had a good legislature, the best in the country to begin with. Many of us reformers believe that redistricting, the first step in reforming the legislature, is as important as economic reform. Therefore, you don't agree on the economic reforms that the Republicans want, even if they're reasonable, unless they're reasonable right now on starting the process of changing the legislature.
Bill, so that's interesting that you should say that, because, you know, there was a moment when the governor was in Binghamton. He was there, I believe, giving his budget address, and he was standing with Senator Libous, who we just saw just right there in some file video. Okay. And he was asked about Senator Libous and whether he would push Senator Libous, who is the deputy majority leader, of course, to vote for redistricting reform. And he said, well, you should ask Senator Libous. He's standing right here. In other words, he sort of punted. I mean, is the governor doing enough on this? It sounds to me like you're saying
no,
he's not. Okay.
I would have put my arm around Libous with a big smile and said, I love you, but are you going to live up to your pledge? That's what needs to be done. And what we're going to do, and I encourage others to do, is we're going to pick one or two Republican state senators this month, and we're going to focus on going to their district and getting them to change their mind. Cuomo needs to do two things. One, he needs to state that he will veto the LAP 4 legislative budget for redistricting. That's stating, if you aren't going to let this bill out of committee, then I'm not giving you the money to do redistricting, period, and therefore let's face this issue now versus waiting until January 2012. Two, we encourage him to let it be known, just like Spitzer went out and campaigned in Nassau for Craig Johnson, that he is going to focus on a couple Republican state senators and, yes, horse trade. if the governor is not willing to do it, and we don't sit in his shoes, it may be an unreasonable request when you take a look at the other priorities, nothing will happen.
So what?
The governor may veto. Go ahead.
Who will you be focused on? And when you say that you're going to focus on them, what does that mean? I remember what you did during the primary. You helped Gustavo Rivera, who was running against Pedro Espada. He was your Exhibit A for everything that was wrong with Albany. He's now, of course, been indicted. He's going to trial in September. That would be Pedro Espada, not Gustavo Rivera. He's now a senator. Will you be running ads? Will you be robocalling in these senators' districts? Who will you be picking?
Well, that's in process. We've narrowed it down, in our case, to 2 state senators. We encourage other groups to pick their own state senate. We're not going to go to Rochester against DeLisi, but I would suggest reformers in Rochester go to work. And we will announce within about 8 days the 2 state senators we're picking. It will start by just going to their districts now. 212 is a long ways away. While I'm not encouraged this will get solved until 212, the fact is, the only prayer to have fair elections in 212 is action now, whether it be by groups like us or the governor deciding that it's reasonable for us to ask him to use his leverage specifically now. Well, otherwise, we just have a... Go ahead, Steve.
How much money are you going to spend, Bill?
No idea.
Okay. And you can't tell us who those 2 senators are?
I know the 2 we've picked. I've made calls on one of them. I got to pick the second one. And it's not just New Roosevelt. We will be asking other reform groups, some of the same groups that came up and demonstrated against Pedro Espada in Westchester, to join us. But I can tell you this, we're doing it, but it's just something one group like ours is doing. Others need to do what they need to do, and we also need the governor to decide whether it's realistic or not to move up redistricting and have it actually be something that he turns to Skelos and says, okay, you got to do this or you're not getting XYZ.
Okay, so wait, you're not going to tell me who these senators are, upstate, downstate?
Next week we will.
Okay. The governor
I
has
can tell you neither one worth considering are in New York City.
Okay, interesting. The governor has a lot of priorities. I mean, a lot of priorities, right? He's got a massive budget fight. He's got to wring some concessions out of the public employees unions. He's dealing with last in, first out with the mayor of New York City, who is, of course, himself a heavy hitter. He's got a lot of stuff on his plate. When you poll redistricting, Bill, you don't get a lot of people saying that this is a top priority for them. They care more about their taxes. They care more about being able to have a job.
Not only is that true, it's not going to change. This is a very complex issue. That's why it needs to come from the governor or other reformers. But the fact is that unless you change it, you're going to have more economic problems, because this is why we're in trouble to begin with, a backwards legislature. So we feel that this is equally important.
Okay, well, before I let you go, I got to ask you, was that the governor?
I'll tell you what, I have a lot of empathy. I think he's done a brilliant job on Medicaid and many of the other areas. It's presumptuous to think that we sit in his seat, but this is a 35-year-old battle. We're embarrassed by what Governor Patterson and our Democratic leaders did on this last year, but the fact is neither of these parties deserve to be in power, and we have to continue to lead a fight. Okay, well, Bill Samuels, when and if the governor calls you to tell you what he's going to be doing in response to your pressure, you let us know. In the meantime, I want to thank you very much for joining us from New York City tonight. Hey, thank you, Liz.